Good morning. Welcome to CATEX-TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. This is a live broadcast from Princeton, New Jersey. I'd like to welcome our friends at Alley Street in London. I know that they're watching. Good to see you, too. Today is Thursday, July 16th, 2009. It's 11:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in the U.S. It's 4:30 p.m. in London, where Alley Street is. And it's 9:30 a.m. in Mexico City. If you need to reach us during the broadcast, you can phone in toll-free at 1-866-67-CATEX. Overseas, our AOL instant mail address is CATEX-TV. On this day in history, 64 years ago, out in the deserts at White Sands, New Mexico, and Alamogordo, New Mexico, the first atomic bomb, the first nuclear weapon ever, was detonated. It was the first American test bomb. The news was flashed instantly to President Truman, who was meeting with Churchill and Stalin in Potsdam at the time. Now to our main news. Economic news in the U.S., unemployment claims dipped. The number of Americans filing claims for unemployment benefits last week fell to the lowest level since January. They dropped by 47,000, all the way down to 522,000, lower than forecast. The number of people collecting unemployment insurance also plunged by a record 642,000. That's apparently due to seasonal issues surrounding the closures of assembly plants at the U.S. car makers. One observer did say, though, that the trend seems to be toward lessening job losses, even if we do allow for the fact that there may be distortions you get in July with layoffs in the auto sector. Jobless claims have been forecast to decline to 553,000. This from an originally reported 565,000 the prior week, so that's pretty good. The stock market is down about 8 points, actually, despite that news. And this next piece of news. J.P. Morgan Chase, following Goldman, posted a second quarter profit of $2.72 billion, a 36% jump that easily surpassed expectations as strength in its core consumer and investment banking business offset a jump in credit loss. J.P. Morgan is the second big financial institution in a week to release upbeat earning news. Reported net income of $3.72 billion, that's up 36% from $2 billion. Revenue rose 39% up to $25.6 billion from $18.5 billion. Analysts had forecast revenue of a little over $25 billion for the quarter. And in some other good economic news, 3 for 3. China's economic growth accelerated in the second quarter amid a stimulus-fueled investment boom, boosting hopes that the world's third largest economy is emerging from the depression. The economy in China expanded by just a hair under 8% in the April to June period from a year earlier. It's up 6.1% growth in GDP from the previous quarter. An economist said, quote, "The data showed the economic recovery is stronger than expected. Many analysts believe China will be the first major country to emerge from the worst global slump since the 30s. The hopes are that that would pull the rest of the world out of recession as China buys more raw materials, industrial components, and consumer goods from struggling economies in Europe and the U.S. More updates on the plane crash in Iran now. A technical problem is believed to have caused the crash of the Russian-made airliner, which burst into flames and plunged into farmland, killing all 168 people on board yesterday. The head of the Iranian Transport Ministry's crisis unit said, "The pilot probably could not be blamed for this crash. We think it was likely due to technical error." Iranian officials said that 3 black boxes from the Tupolev airliner had been found, but that 2 were seriously damaged. The head of the agency said, quote, "Because of the severity of the accident, 2 systems linked with the black box have been damaged in such a way that the tapes were scattered on the ground." The plane caught fire in midair en route to Armenia and plunged into farmland just outside a village in northwest Iran. 5 Russian experts are due in Tehran tomorrow to probe the cause of the crash. The plane had undergone a safety check in Russia last month. Witnesses said that the plane was ablaze before it smashed into the ground. One relief worker said, quote, "There is not a single piece which can be identified. There is not a single finger of anybody left." The insurance ramifications of this were reported on this morning in Insurance Day in an article by Christopher Monroe. Mr. Monroe writes that U.S. insurers are unable to provide cover for Iranian companies, which is something perhaps we overlooked yesterday and not mentioning. And as a result, crash claims could in fact begin to filter into the Lloyd's market. Industry officials say that although General Insurance Corporation of India is thought to be one of the insurers on the slip, additionally the cover could include some Russian insurers. Mr. Monroe reports that some observers say that the plane's hull and machinery policy is likely to have been placed with the Russian insurer Ingostrak. The value of a new Tupolev 154, as we noted yesterday, is in the region of $45 million. Mr. Monroe reports that United Insurance Brokers and HSBC brokers have been mentioned as possible brokers of the policy. Another source said, quote, "It's my guess that the liability policy was placed in London. However, any policy written in London would still need to be placed with a non-U.S. domiciled insurer. Furthermore, since Caspian Airlines is based in Iran, it must also be considered whether its cover had to follow takaful principles, the Islamic prohibition against making interest profits. Caspian's fleet is believed to be made up exclusively of older Russian planes. It's believed that the plane which crashed had entered service with Bakhtar Afghan Airlines in 1987, then sold to Afghan Ariana Airlines in 1988, and then bought by Caspian in 1998. Not necessarily an all-star hit parade of five-star maintenance groups, perhaps. Stock market remains down about 8 points. We'll go to a word from our sponsors and come back with the rest of the news. Some news from England. More than 6,000 workers at American Express in England are contemplating reduced retirement income after Amex told them it was suspending pension contributions for the next 18 months. Amex said that payments to its occupational retirement scheme had become unaffordable in the current economic downturn, although they'll keep the situation under review. Until this month, American Express paid a core contribution of 3% of salary into the scheme with a pledge to match employee contributions of up to 6%. The American Express largely non-unionized workforce accepted the deal. Stakeholder pensions are personal retirement plans created by the government as a cheap alternative to trustee-based schemes. They're equivalent to IRAs and 401ks in the U.S. Employers are under no obligation to make a contribution, and they have no responsibility for the success of the stock market invested plans. Most of the plans, of course, have dropped precipitously in value. Amex's staff is based mainly in Sussex at centers in Brighton and Burgess Hill, of course with people in their London Belgravia headquarters. Much of the recent debate on pensions in Britain has focused on the affordability of guaranteed plans, mainly enjoyed by the public sector workers, as well as older workers in some private sector companies. In these plans, employers typically pay contributions worth more than 20% of salary. Yesterday afternoon, the space shuttle Endeavour finally blasted off from Cape Canaveral in